joining us on SVTV, you are watching the news. These are the headlines. Northwest and Southwest regions in Cameroon are little by little regaining peace. Fear is gradually evading from GLORIA and Bamenda inhabitants in Cameroon, where population really expect an open dialogue between the head of state, His Excellency Mr. Paul Biya, and the Anglophone teachers and lawyers. Gambia political transition after West African leaders heading to Gambia for peace mediation. Only side UN Security Council urges Yahya Jammeh to cede the power to Barrow. Nigeria, Uyo Church collapses during service, leaves dozens of worshippers dead. The government has ordered an investigation. IMF chief Christine Lagarde is on trial over $425 million state payout in 2008. Peace is gradually regaining the ground in the cities of Bamenda and GLORIA in Cameroon after a period of turmoil. Many have resumed their activities even though fear still remains. Details with our STV colleague.
The unrest that grounded Bamenda last week is gradually setting a peaceful atmosphere. Activities are gradually regaining strength. The hustling spirit has returned to the vibrant Abakwa. Sheds opened, offices functional, circulation in full view. Many are comfortable with the peace, but fear it may just be temporal.
I think everybody is feeling calm. Not all that calm, because there is still little fear, because we know that maybe it will come up again, but we don't know. So we are just praying that everything should stay calm so that we can buy, so that we can feast with our children, with our family.
At the situation, at least there's some calm. This calm does not mean that the problem has been resolved. There is still, when you look at the situation, it is because the people are waiting that at least the head of state should come out, at least say something relating to the problems. We don't have peace, because when you go around, you still see police, even at the entrance of the market, everywhere in town, you still see them. That is to tell you that there's no total calm. It's just a relative calm.
Yeah, the situation now is a bit calm in the sense that I cannot just rule out that the rush up and down will not come, in the sense that the other days it occurs same. Within a twinkle of an eye, people were now rushing up and down. Let's put it that it's a bit stable, but we don't know what will happen in the near future.
The anger of the youth didn't spur from space.
I think the youth are angry mostly because they don't like where their country is heading to. If we look statistically, most youth in Cameroon, when they finish school, to them they are traveling abroad.
Everyone has gone back to their routine activities, not like the struggle is over, but giving a room for dialogue between the government of Cameroon, teachers and lawyers for amicable and long-lasting solutions to the Anglophone problems.
The United Nations Security Council is urging Gambia's incumbent President Yahya Jammeh to cede power to President-elect Adama Barrow. Spain's deputy permanent representative to the UN said Jammeh must respect the choice of the Gambian people and transfer power to Barrow, CCTV reports.
Renewed the request to outgoing President Jammeh to respect the choice of the sovereign people of the Gambia and to transfer without condition and undue delay power to the President-elect, Mr. Adama Barrow. The members of the Security Council reiterated their call to all parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from violence. They further expressed their commitment to continue to follow closely the evolution of the situation in the Gambia in the framework of the conflict prevention role of the Security Council.
The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and also the 15-member UN Security Council have condemned President Yahya Jammeh's rejection of the election results and have called on him to accept the outcome. And this is a worrying development for the United Nations. In fact, the UN Security Council is holding an urgent meeting behind closed doors on Gambia to hear the latest update from the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Jeffrey Feltman, who will also also briefed them on on diplomatic efforts that have been underway during this electoral process. Now, the UN, what more can it do? The UN can exert more pressure on the government of President Jammeh to accept the election results. It can opt to mediate as well. And if the situation deteriorates to the point where there might be civil unrest or violent clashes, the UN can also it can also impose sanctions. So there are a range of options for the United Nations to insert itself into this, but of course the UN is limited in that it cannot force the president's hand. The UN has to respect the internal process of a government. What happens if the government doesn't respect its own election results, as we've seen? What happens if that situation deteriorates, violent clashes erupt, and there's a potential that civil unrest could spill over into the region? Well, the UN can't really do much because it's beyond its jurisdiction to compel the government to accept the results of the election. The UN can persuade, it can mediate, and it can impose sanctions. But as we've seen in the past in other political crises, these measures don't always reap results. In Syria, Burundi, South Sudan, Libya, whether the UN is mediating or imposing sanctions, these don't go very far. And the line between respecting sovereignty and restoring constitutional stability becomes even more blurred when countries outside of, separately from the UN, intervene themselves, either directly or by proxy, by either supporting opposite sides in a conflict or providing weapons. So that line becomes so much more blurred, and it's not something the UN can control or manage.
Dozens of people have been killed during a church service in southern Nigeria when the roof collapsed as worshippers, including the regional governor, were praying. Al Jazeera's Ahmed Idris reports from Abuja.
Thousands came to worship at the Rainers Bible Church in Uyo and celebrate the ordination of the local bishop. A few minutes into the service, the roof started to cave in. The church was still under construction, and reports say workers had been rushing to finish it in time for Saturday's ceremony to ordain its founder as a bishop. In 2014, a church in Lagos collapsed, killing 116 people. Many of them were visitors from South Africa.
Enforcement of building standards and codes is usually lax in many parts of Nigeria. Corruption is an ongoing thing, and contractors can easily exploit that to cut corners and costs.
The government has ordered an investigation.
It's not a good thing, and we are really, really devastated that this could happen. But at the same time, I pray that people should be calm, and let's actually assess the situation. Let's see the casualties that we have, and then be rest assured on the part of government. We'll do everything possible to make sure that this will never happen again in this state.
But this assurance comes too late for the families who lost loved ones in the incident. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Abuja, Nigeria.
International Monetary Fund Chief Christine Lagarde is on trial for her role in a $425 million state payouts to businessman Bernard Tapie. It dates back to 2008 when she was France's finance minister. CCTV Elena Casas reports from Paris.
Christine Lagarde in court this afternoon. Her lawyers essentially have two key arguments. One is that she can't be held responsible for negligence in this case because it's the people around her who were negligent rather than Lagarde herself. So essentially the lawyers are saying that as finance minister she had a lot of different responsibilities. She had to rely on her advisors. And some of those advisors didn't give her the right information at the right time to enable her to make the best possible decision. The other thing, of course, is that she's one of 5 people who've been implicated in this case, and her lawyers essentially are saying that she's being asked to take the rap for other people who had a much stronger implication in the decision to award that out-of-court arbitration settlement to Bernard Tapie. So essentially they're saying the buck shouldn't stop with her. Her lawyers want a separate criminal trial from around the question of whether there was the misuse of public funds in this case to conclude before, they say, her case can properly be judged.
Indeed. The appeals court had thrown out the decision from that arbitration that Madame Lagarde had ordered as finance minister. What were the arguments used in arriving to that decision, and does that in turn have a bearing on this trial?
Well, the appeals court concluded several years ago that Bernard Tapie did not have the right to this money that he was awarded in an out-of-court settlement. Now, Lagarde's lawyers aren't arguing that he did deserve that money, or even really that it was the right decision to take it to an out-of-court arbitration. They're simply saying that the buck shouldn't stop with her, that it wasn't a case of her negligence. Yes, she did sign off on this payment, but they're saying, as I was saying, that she wasn't given the correct information, and that, more importantly, that she didn't intend to deliberately intervene in favour of the businessman Bernard Tapie. Now, he is quite a colourful public figure who's very well known in France. He was once a politician in the south in Marseille back in the 1980s, and a close personal friend of Nicolas Sarkozy, who of course was president at the time that he was awarded this payout in 2008. But nobody is alleging necessarily that Lagarde had a personal relationship with him, and what her lawyers are extremely keen to emphasise is that in her case, this was simply a mishap, if you like. It was her counsel acknowledged a bad decision. She acknowledges that, but that it wasn't deliberately negligent, and that she wasn't deliberately intervening in his favour.
Indeed. One last question for you. The IMF's managing director, as we understand, is being tried in a special court for ministers. This is, as I understand it, the fifth such trial to actually take place in French history. How exactly does this court work, and what's the rationale for its establishment? Why not just prosecute the minister in the court system like every other French citizen?
Well, this court, the High Court of Justice of the Republic, was only founded in 1993 to deal with allegations involving the then Prime Minister, and as you say, it's only the fifth case ever heard. It's a very special tribunal which is only intended to hear cases of criminal offences allegedly committed by government ministers in the exercise of their jobs. So if they were to commit a completely irrelevant criminal offence, like the former budget minister Jérôme Cahuzac, who was jailed last week for tax fraud, he was tried in a completely ordinary criminal court. She's in this court because this case is deliberately, particularly relates to her work as a government minister, and therefore it's being tried in a separate court which has a rather unusual jury. It's actually a team of 12 politicians who are across the political spectrum and 5 judges who will be judging her rather than judges as would normally be the case.
Former Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Guterres has taken the oath of office to be the 9th United Nations Secretary General. His tenure is to last till the end of 2021 and begins in January next year. Leslie Mirungu has more.
I, Antonio Guterres.
A new era begins for the 71-year-old global body. In his speech during the Monday swearing-in ceremony, the former Portuguese Prime Minister pledged to personally help broker peace in various conflicts. He also said reform was necessary for the UN to become more effective.
Fear is driving the decisions of many people around the world. And we must understand their anxieties and meet their needs without losing sight of our universal values. It is time to reconstruct relations between people and leaders, national and international. Time for leaders to listen and show that they care about their own people and about the global stability and solidarity on which we all depend.
Congratulating his successor, Ban Ki-moon said he was leaving the UN in the hands of a man of integrity.
Even as I prepare to leave, my heart will stay, as it has since I was a child, right here with the United Nations. And that heart is greatly comforted knowing that I'm passing the baton to Secretary General Antonio Guterres, a man of integrity and principle. I have no doubt that he, with his passion and compassion, will successfully navigate many complex challenges and steer the organization to a new and higher heights.
Diplomats said Guterres is expected to shortly name Nigeria's Environment Minister Amina Mohammed as the Deputy UN Secretary General.
I think that one very important element of the agenda will be to give a clear signal that gender parity is a must. And so in the appointments I'll be making, and the first ones will be announced soon, you will see that gender parity will become a clear priority from top to bottom in the UN, and it will have to be respected by all.
Guterres is the first former head of government to be elected to run the world body, and that experience is expected to be reflected in how he operates. Leslie Murungu, CCTV.
Thank you for your attention. See you next time on ASB TV, and may God bless you.